Hello, and welcome to Nobody Union's Racial Trivia series, where we focus on a particular race from the Warcraft universe and discuss both its history and any alteration in the World of Warcraft game by Blizzard. Today's racial trivia is on the Blue Dragonflight, which was formerly ruled by the great and powerful aspect Malygos, the Lord of Magic. The Blue Dragonflight was all but devastated by the evil Deathwing and his Black Dragonflight thousands of years ago, and it never truly recovered from that slaughter. The Blue Dragonflight, however, is now ruled by Caligos. Though there are few great blue dragons left in the world, their magical powers are incredible and all but awesome to behold. Native to Northrend, the few blues stay relatively close to the Great Dragonblight, where they commune with the ancient dragon spirits who have long since passed. Their freezing breath and gargantuan claws have been the death of many hapless travelers in Northrend. Like all the other dragonflights, the Blue Dragonflight is a host of a wide variety of draconic kind. This includes blue worms, blue dragons, blue drakes, blue whelps, blue dragon spawns, and blue dragonids. So today we're going to be looking at Warcraft RPG Shadow and Light, page 90 through 92, under Malygos the Spellweaver. Malygos, the Lord of Magic, is said to have created magic and spells, although this is likely mere legend. His command of magic is quite impressive, rivaling that of a demigod, although he does not aspire to such power. While physically he is not as powerful as some of the other aspects, Malygos counters this disadvantage with his phenomenal command of magic. Like most of his kind, Malygos is a solitary creature who avoids contact with others. He is believed to dwell in Northrend, in a lair filled with some of the greatest magical artifacts known to exist, including many whose powers are discussed only in hushed whispers. Returned to sanity after Deathwing's defeat at Grim Batol, Malygos now attempts to rebuild his decimated dragonflight. He spends his days studying magic, refining his abilities, and studying the various planes of the multiverse, both remotely and in person, while his few remaining children scour the world for ancient artifacts and repositories of arcane power. Malygos prefers to dwell in frost-covered lands, ice-shackled lakes, or within Arctic waters. Within these areas, those inhabitants who know of his presence learn quickly to respect his desire to keep to himself. Some sorcerers and magical creatures pay him homage, but he is not a deity and does not answer or acknowledge their efforts. This next passage can be found within Warcraft RPG Manual of Monsters, page 31, under Blue Dragon. The mighty dragon bursts from frigid waters, its muscular form covered in glistening scales. It has patterned cobalt markings across its neck and upper body, and its wings fold almost invisibly against its sinuous body. Under Description. Blue dragons are regal creatures, their posture and facial expressions expressing wisdom and intellect. They are creatures of ice and water, often found in cold regions, and preferring to keep to themselves. They are studious, enjoying both literature and scholarly texts, and study any bit of knowledge or trivia that they come across. These dragons are best known for altering their forms and integrating into other societies in order to learn new technologies, spells, and crafts. Blue dragons are peaceful creatures, but very territorial. Once a blue dragon has claimed a certain territory, woe to any, even dragons of their own flight, who enter into that area without permission. Under Blue Dragon Society. The blue dragon's aspect is the massive blue worm known as Malygos, the Lord of Magic. He is said to have established magic itself and created all the spells that set the sky and earth into motion. While he is not revered as a god, For blue dragons see no godhood in scientific fact, he is considered the greatest scientific mind ever to have existed in the multiverse, or at least his flight considers him so. Given their parentage, blue dragons are exceptional spellcasters. They have a natural affinity for spellcasting, and most powers of sorcery are instinct, even to young drakes. Because of their natural propensity for magic, they have high magic resistances and can withstand many magical attacks. Furthermore, their breath weapon can drain enemies' magic energy, what they call mana, in effect the blue dragon's term, withdrawing Malagos's favor. Blue dragons are a bit xenophobic, keeping to their territories and maintaining their own studies without interference. A blue dragon does not hesitate to attack if his territory is disturbed or invaded. Under such circumstances, a blue dragon is as violent and destructive as any black. The Blue Dragonflight was all but destroyed by Deathwing long ago, and even in modern days, blue dragons are rare and difficult to find. Although some great blue dragons remain in the world, they are few and far between, studying their magic almost to the exclusion of all else. They long ago gave up the war against Deathwing and his flight, preferring to withdraw into solitude. Blue dragons are native to the continent of Northrend, where they remain close to the Great Dragon Blight, the final resting place of dragons. The blue dragons once communed with the dead there to ensure that each draconic spirit made its way into the beyond. Northrend lies much in control of the Scourge, but blues still make pilgrimages to the dark Northlands, seeking answers hidden among the bones of the dead. The most powerful blue dragon sorcerers claim that the spirits of the dead tell them a new upheaval is on its way, a cataclysm that will outweigh any trouble the world of Azeroth has yet endured. The blue dragons say this often, no matter what disaster the world suffers, so few have given their word much credence this time. And finally, under combat. Blue dragons are not cruel beasts, preferring a quick kill for enemies and prey alike. They often use abilities and spells from afar, camouflaging their approach in fog and other foul weather to gain the advantage of surprise. They are excellent tacticians and attempt to damage or disable any opposing spellcasters before they commit to a physical attack. Blue dragons prefer to fight from the air, using spells and breath weapons to their fullest. Even when an enemy is routed, blues seldom land, instead swooping overhead to further panic their prey. Blues do not land unless there is an immediate need or unless all opposition is destroyed. The Blue Dragonflight encompasses both the literal descendants of Malagos, the Blue Dragons, and their loyal servants and companions. For thousands of years between the Sundering and the destruction of the Demon Soul, blue dragons were all but unheard of, but they have begun to emerge in the world once again. Historically, dragons have all had a reputation for spending their days in solitary contemplation of the secrets of the world. But in recent times, the blue dragons have proven to be more social due to the growing threats to all living creatures. In addition to their noted obsession with magic, blue dragons also enjoy researching other subjects. They could be called the academics among dragons. They have begun to serve more and more as the teachers of younger members of the other dragonflights. While in humanoid form, many dragons also notice the scientific discoveries of the other races, and they take an increasing interest in the development of engineering and similar studies. Adult blue dragons most often have names ending in Gos for male or Gaza for females. Sometimes blue dragon names have synonyms of the word blue, or terms relating to spellcasting. When taking humanoid form, blue dragons most often choose gnomish or high elven forms. The history of the Blue Dragonflight can be traced back to the Titans before the Titans departed Azeroth. They charged the greatest species of the world with the task of watching over it, See my previous video, The Charge of the Dragons, under Warcraft History and Lore. Norgannon, the Titan Lorekeeper and Master Magician, granted the Blue Dragon, Malygos, a portion of his vast power. From then on, Malygos would be known as the Spellweaver, the Guardian of Magic, and Hidden Arcanum. The time following this came to be known as the Age of Dragons, when the civilization of dragonkind was at its peak. For thousands of years, his children prospered and experimented with the eldritch powers of the universe, unrivaled in their mastery of arcane power. The Blue Dragons were numerous and coexisted peacefully with the other dragonflights, working together to safeguard their world. But this age and flight would end with the most tragic of fates. When the Night Elves inadvertently called the Burning Legion into the world, the Blue Dragons were among the first to realize the potential threat, and when the aspect of the earth, Neltharion, suggested creating a magical artifact to aid in the destruction of the demons, the Blues were some of the first to agree to the plan. Malygos himself was one of Neltharion's closest friends and strongest supporters, and he gave much of his own essence towards the creation of this object, called the Dragon Soul, also known as the Demon Soul. When each of the aspects had contributed a portion of his or her essence to the artifact, Neltharion deemed it complete and brought it to bear against the demons, but only for a precious few moments. Soon, he turned the artifact against the terrified Night Elves as well, and finally his own brethren. The shocked dragons were helpless to resist the power of the Dragon Soul, for it contained a fraction of the essence of each, with the exception of Neltharion himself. All of the dragonflights, some Neltharion's own, were paralyzed in the air until the timely intervention of Kralastras, one of the mates of the Red Dragon Queen, who had been absent from the initial use of the artifact. While Kralastras was no match for the might of the aspect of Earth, he was powerful enough to interrupt Neltharion's concentration for a moment, which freed the other dragons from their paralysis and allowed them to act. Malygos, infuriated at the betrayal of one of his closest companions, struck first, but at a great price. As the Blue Dragonflight flew into formation to attack Neltharion, the mighty Black Worm unleashed the full fury of the Dragon Soul against them, and the power instantly slew nearly every one of them. Malygos narrowly managed to raise a protective spell fast enough to survive, and only a handful of others reached the safety of his barrier in time. As the other dragons turned to act, Neltharion retreated, leaving the Blue Dragonflight completely broken in his wake. Following the betrayal, the surviving red, green, and bronze dragons secluded themselves, hoping to recover from the Dragon Soul's powers. Kralastras teleported himself to the icy caverns of the Blue Flight to search for any remaining life. He found none, save a few nearly frozen, but still intact eggs. Knowing these eggs were the only hope of a future the Blue Flight had, he placed them in a pocket universe, where time ran ever so slowly, until he could pass them on to somebody else he could trust. The Kaldori and their allies managed to defeat the Legion ultimately, but also at a great cost. Azeroth was sundered. The loss of most of his children and most of his mates drove Malygos to insanity. Malygos continued for some time in the war against Neltharion, who now called himself Deathwing, determined to take vengeance for his flight, but Malygos's presence in the world diminished over time. One of Malygos's last sane acts was placing many of his surviving dragons into the caverns of Masthoril to hold eternal vigil over the sacred site of Mount Hyjal, location of the world tree Nordrasil, and the second well of eternity. Malygos, in his rage and grief, split his home from the rest of the land, creating the gap later known as the West Rift that separates Kol Dara from what had become mainland Northrend. The few survivors settled on Kol Dara, carving their own caverns out of the Nexus. For 10,000 years, the aspect Malygos fell deeper and deeper into his madness. He isolated himself in his lair and refused all visitors. Blue dragons were rarely seen, and most of the survivors had gone into hiding from the Blacks. For thousands of years, none but a few of the most ancient dragons knew of Malygos's whereabouts, and much of his dragonflight hid in shame and in solitude, realizing their fight against Deathwing was doomed without their leader. After having nearly wiped out the flight, the Black Dragons were not ready to leave the last few Blues in peace. The survivors of the Blue Flight had fled to Northrend, where Deathwing attacked, slaughtering them by the dozens. The survivors fought back, but were no match for Deathwing's ferocity. In the process, their homes were destroyed, and the land so damaged it could never recover. The Black Dragonflight butchered the Blue Dragonflight, or at least what was left of it, killing off many of the few survivors who had survived Deathwing's betrayal during the War of the Ancients, bringing it closer and closer to complete extinction. The area became known as the Dragon Blight. Over what is now Crystal Song Forest, another battle between the Blacks and the Blues was waged. The dying Blues released their magic, and it sprinkled down to cover the landscape. Finally, an elder blue worm beset by many Blacks released a spell to turn his attackers into stone, but the magic blanketing the area amplified the spell and crystallized the landscape. The drawn-out war between the Black Dragonflight and the other flights decimated the species, with all flights losing members, the Blues losing many of what few they had left. The Dragonflights hunted the Blacks to the brink of extinction, but were greatly weakened by their sacrifice to the Demon Soul. Ultimately, the Blacks were nearly wiped out, though the other flights never truly recovered from those dark times, and were never again seen in the same numbers as before. The Age of Dragons had passed. A few remaining members of his flight continued their Mad Master's job of studying magic throughout the millennia in attempts to keep the mortal race's abuse of it in check. The Archanomicon, a map of the world's ley lines gifted to Malagos ages ago by the Titan Organon, has been continuously updated and revised by the Blue Dragons over the long years of Malagos' seclusion. Other Blues, such as Sephiron and Azargos, continued to search for and hoard artifacts of great magical power, keeping them from inexperienced hands. When the Legion was planning its second invasion of Azeroth, another agent, Archanomicon, attempted to sway the Guardian Medivh away from the path he was taking under the control of the Dark Titan Sargeras. 1,000 years prior to the opening of the Dark Portal, the almost extinct Blue Dragons still managed to lend their aid to the Night Elves and the Bronze Dragonflight during the War of the Shifting Sands. Led by Arygos, child of Malagos, the Blues fought the Silithid and their Karaji masters furiously and ultimately helped push them back to their city, where they were sealed away from the world. The dragons suffered few casualties, but the progeny of Malagos, Arygos, was until recently believed lost, having charged deep into Ahn'Qiraj during the final push. After the war, a shard of the Scepter of the Shifting Sands was entrusted to the blue worm Azargos by Anachronos, the Bronze. In the events leading up to the Second War, Deathwing led a powerful orc warlock named Nekros to the Dragon Soul, now renamed the Demon Soul, and instructed him how to use it. Nekros used the Demon Soul to force the Red Dragon aspect, Alexstrasza, into submission, and forced the rest of the Red Dragonflight to serve him or risk the death of their queen. Kralastras, who escaped by faking his death and taking the identity of an Archmage of the Kirin, sought the other aspects for help. Malagos had seemed almost indifferent to the news at first. When Kralastras asked for Malagos' assistance in his queen's rescue, he hinted to the Lord of the Blues that as the aspect of life, there could be something Alexstrasza could do for him and his nearly extinct flight. After heavy consideration and some coaxing from Ursera, he agreed. Though each aspect was difficult to convince, Kralastras eventually succeeded, and during the final battle, known as the Battle of Grim Batol, the dragons battled Deathwing in the skies. Kralastras' human apprentice, Ronan, defeated Nekros and used one of Deathwing's scales to destroy the Demon Soul. The destruction of the artifact released the ancient power that had been sealed inside for millennia and allowed the aspects to defeat Deathwing and force him to retreat. After having his powers restored to him, Malagos regained his sanity, and his agents became more active in the world. The Blue Dragonflight, still recovering from the events that occurred 10,000 years ago, nevertheless continued to safeguard the world from corrupting magic and those who would wield it. Since the Blue Dragonflight was so long secluded from the affairs of mortals, most were pleasantly surprised at the progress humans and high elves had made. Their pride in the accomplishments of these races allowed them to justify taking humanoid form to trade secrets with the mortals. Since Deathwing's disappearance, the Black Dragonflight is less organized, and this chaos allowed the Blues the chance to finally strike back against the murderous dragons who hunted them for millennia. General Cobalton, one of the eldest and most powerful of the Blue Dragon spawn, organized an army to protect all creatures against the threat of the Black Dragonflight, and if he has his way, his army will grow strong enough to obliterate the Black Dragonflight entirely. The Blue Dragonflight was nearly absent from the battle against the Second Coming of the Burning Legion, also known as the Third War. In the aftermath of the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Blue Dragon Guardians were stationed at Hyjal's summit, where they, along with the Reds, Greens, and Bronzes, guard the World Tree from another attack by the remnants of the Burning Legion and Dark Whisper Gorge. During the war, the fabled Sunwell had been lost to the elves of Quell Thalas. Malagos and the Blues felt a great flaring of power coming from Lordaeron. The Spellweaver, with no elders at his disposal, sent the young Caligos to investigate. Tiragosa, Caligos' intended mate, followed soon after, arriving just in time to save Caligos from the scourge. In their company was a strange young woman by the name of Anvina Teague. On a visit to Terran Mill, they were joined by the paladin Jorid Mace. The four journeyed together, their exploits eventually leading them to Quell Thalas, where, after being assaulted by Dar Khan Drather and an enslaved Coralistras, they discovered Anvina was the new avatar of the Sunwell. Darkhan was defeated, and Anvina was left in the care of Lorthamar Theron and Halduran Brightwing. Caligos, having sworn to look after her, remained in Quell Thalas as Anvina's guardian. The Burning Legion survivors of the Third War, led by Lord Kazak, were ultimately able to reopen the Dark Portal. Once the initial demonic onslaught was subdued, a number of nether dragons attempted to cross into Azeroth, only to be met by a force of blue dragons that quickly destroyed and prevented all but one in entering. The lone survivor, Zuraku, was however quickly captured by Syntheria. Since that time, the blue dragons monitored the portal from their sanctum, and nothing crosses in or out without their knowing. In World of Warcraft, the icy caverns of Mas Thoril and Winterspring teem with blue dragonkin under the matron protectorate Hela and General Cobalton. These dragonkin are fierce enemies of the Black Flight and desire to strike out against its new leaders, Nefarian and Onyxia. They also keep an eye on the demons to the south in Dark Whisper Gorge. The dragons are concerned the demons there will soon launch another attack against Mount Hyjal, and the dragons stationed there. Recently, however, they have come under attack by Nefarian's dragon riders, coming in the darkness of night and kidnapping whelps to be used in experiments to create a new chromatic flight. Azergos and his brood of dragonspawn guard the ruins of the ancient night elven city of Eldorath. The city is rumored to hold many powerful highborn artifacts scattered throughout the ruins. Azergos will stop at nothing to safeguard these artifacts from falling into mortal hands. Arigos, thought to have been lost during the War of the Shifting Sands, was recently found to be alive inside Ankarash as a slave of Cthulhu, along with Kelestras and Marithra. The Dark Master of Ankarash used the tortured dragons to power his new creations, Moam, and the other obsidian destroyers. Andergos came to Ankarash after sensing her trapped brethren within, but dares not travel into the temple from fear of falling under the old god's control. In the Burning Crusade, Tiragosa, Princess of the Blue Flight, has traveled to the shattered realm of Outland to study the mysterious nether dragons. The nether dragons are the spawn of Deathwing, who as eggs were exposed to the arcane energies of the twisting nether when Draenor was shattered by Ner'zhul's portals. Tiragosa seeks to better understand the rogue nether dragons under the control of Varaku, and ultimately take control of them and keep their temperament inherited from their sire under control. Caligos had until recently remained guarding Anvina on Quel Danas. The return of the Sun King, Kael'thas Sunstrider, fresh from his defeat in Tempest Keep, has brought the Burning Legion to Azeroth, and Caligos has been taken as their slave. Malygos has sent Madragosa to assist Caligos in combating the demonic horde. In Wrath of the Lich King, having awoken from the madness that engulfed him, Malygos quickly assessed the state of magical affairs on Azeroth and concluded that magic was running amok throughout the world, blaming the mortal races and their reckless pursuit of magical power. Determined to forestall a catastrophe, the Blue's aspect decreed that the world's unbridled magic must be reined in by any means necessary. Determined to manipulate all existing magic to serve his own purposes, he now seeks to divert Azeroth's ley lines to his own home, the Nexus, by the use of giant constructs known as Surge Needles. The Blue Dragonflight has been ordered to maneuver the colossal machines into key positions over the magical ley line clusters. Their work has already begun in the Dragonblight. Malygos' actions, however, carry disastrous consequences, splintering the world's crust and opening unstable rifts in the twisting nether. If successful, his tampering could result in an ecological and magical catastrophe that would threaten not only the stability of Northrend, but ultimately the equilibrium of the entire planet. The Red Dragonflight and the Kirin now fight against Malygos in this new war, which has been dubbed the Nexus War. In their campaign to reign in the world's unbridled magic, the Blue Dragonflight has diverted much of the ley line's magical energy to the Azure Dragon Shrine, empowering the flight and even altering their appearance. With this power, the Blue Flight has boldly begun to launch attacks against Wyrmrest Temple, what was once considered neutral ground. The other flights have formed the Wyrmrest Accord and fight back to defend the temple against their misguided brethren. As the Nexus War has ended, an ambassador of the Blue Dragonflight, Caligos, can now be found at the top of the Wyrmrest Temple. He assists players during the Quel Dalar chain quest. In Cataclysm, after the death of Malygos, the Black Dragonflight invaded Ashara to hunt down Azurgos. Azurgos, along with Kalik, will help low-level Horde players repel the Black's invasion. Arygos apparently betrayed the Blue Dragonflight during the choosing of the new aspect after the death of his father Malygos. Arygos betrays the Blue Dragonflight and tries to become the new aspect by force. However, Caligos is chosen as the new blue aspect, and an enraged Arygos challenges him in a fight for the position. After Arygos is defeated and severely wounded, he retreats into the Eye of Eternity and attempts to use the Focusing Iris. He is then killed by Adelis Blackmore, and his blood is used on the Focusing Iris to give life to Chromatis. Caligos has been confirmed by Chris Metzen at BlizzCon 2010 to be made the new Blue Dragon aspect. In Mist of Pandaria, the Blue Dragonflight has effectively been disbanded during the events of Tides of War, with most, if not all, Blue Dragons leaving their Koldara home. It is stated in the novel they were driven by desire to find a new place in the new world where the hour of twilight has passed. Their former dragon aspect, Caligos, has joined the Kirin Tor. And this currently sums up the Blue Dragonflight. The changes Blizzard made with the Blue Dragonflight were primarily their appearance, of course, but they also changed their attitude or methods of studying magic. It's very confusing, because originally after Deathwing nearly eradicated the Blue Dragonflight, the Blues turned to their original homeland, Northrend, and kept to their own territories, studying magic and slaying any who entered their chambers. But now we see that they in fact are among the mortal races, and entering into societies and groups to learn more about the magic they use. In fact, it was even stated that they were peaceful, but territorial, And unlike the other flights, they enjoy spending time with the humanoid races and learning everything they could about them. This may have been a gradual change over time, or maybe even an alteration in how they perceived things to be, but it nevertheless contradicts what the Blue Flight once stood for, and how they saw things in the world of Azeroth for the longest time. Yet, perhaps an even greater contradiction would be when since the Blue Dragonflight's inception, right from the very start. As we read straight from the RPG books, the Blue Flight in fact believes that all things have a scientific explanation to them, and they don't believe in deities, or things that pertain to spirituality in general, or the spiritual realm. However, they in fact help dead draconic spirits find their way to the afterlife and the Dragonblight, and guide them to their eternal rest. I find this to be very contradictive, as the Blue Flight is more or less intended to be an atheistic and scientific flight, while simultaneously helping dragon souls in the afterlife. Personally, I think it would have made more sense to give this particular field and area of interest to the Red Dragonflight, as they are the protectors of life. It just seems more plausible to me that those who guard, cherish, and protect life would also be the ones to make sure that when a creature dies, especially a dragon, they would guide its soul to eternal paradise, rather than the all-knowing scientific Blue Dragonflight, whose main purpose and intent is purely academic in nature, rather than worrying about the affairs of life and death. A blue dragon is a rare and difficult creature to find, and their society does not have a rigid hierarchy. Although some great blue dragons remain in the world, they are few in number, and very far in between, studying their magic almost in complete exclusion of everything else. All blue dragons serve Malygos with roughly equal standing, although there are some ancient dragons that are considered authority figures simply due to their great knowledge and mastery of magic. It's a society ruled by the powerful, and somewhat of a mutual ranking order, as any real ranking system would do nothing but cause endless debate. Males and females have roughly equal standing in Blue Dragon society, although usually it is the female who chooses her mate. With a few exceptions, blue dragons usually take only a single mate, and they are immensely protective of their mate and their children. Female blue dragons have been known to stalk and observe their potential mate in a number of different forms and ways to gauge the male's worth before revealing themselves or selecting them. Blue dragons are the undisputed masters of magic, their culture revolving around the study and cataloging of magic and spells, primarily but not exclusively arcane magic. They focus on advancing the capacities and capabilities in spell casting, and the acquisition of knowledge and greater magical power to the exclusion of almost everything else. But this is not to say they are single-minded. Rather, the dragons are extremely loyal, and know that the Titans gave their master his domain so that they would use their magic to keep the world safe. As such, the proper use of magic is a matter of great importance to the blue dragons. While blue dragons are naturally curious about the use of warlock magic, fell energies, and the likes thereof, they consider such forms of magic to be perversions of nature. For this reason, warlocks and necromancers are in fact considered enemies of the Blue Dragonflight, although the dragons have higher priorities on their hit list, such as the Black Dragonflight. In their pursuit of magic, however, blue dragons infiltrate mortal societies in humanoid forms to learn more about how mortals practice spell casting. While some blue dragons have engaged in this activity for centuries, it has been widespread only since Malygos' recent recovery from years of insanity. While the blue dragons are primarily interested in arcane magic, other forms interest them as well, especially those that do not require the worship of a divine being. It is for this reason that a number of blue dragons engage in the scholarly study of the Holy Light. Blue dragons have made their way into the ranks of many mortal orders, the Kirin Tor, naturally, but also the Argent Dawn and the Knights of the Silver Hand, to name but a few. Blue dragons are scholars and often learn many languages, posing as mortal wizards and even as paladins, strangely, to better study the magical progress of the younger races. Many strive to impress their master Malygos. Members of the Blue Flight value other thinkers, such as writers, artists, spellcasters, academic types, musicians, and engineers. They have associated themselves with the elves for centuries, And more recently, they study the unique skills of Dwarven, Gnomish, and Goblin engineers. Blue dragon spawn, more often than the dragon spawn of other flights, become proficient arcanists and rise to position of power and authority within their broods, General Cobalton of Mas Thorol being a prime example. This is credited to the unusual intelligence and disposition towards magic associated with the blue dragonflight. Many other dragon spawn are warriors, rogues, hunters, scouts, or gladiators. A few dragon spawn priests worship the blue dragonflight and Malagos, contrary to most blue dragon beliefs, but shamans and druids are almost entirely unheard of among the blue dragonflight. The blue dragonflight does not acknowledge deities or the worship thereof. They believe all things have a scientific explanation and method to it. They seek proof of everything and put no stock in faith whatsoever. The dragons revere Malagos as a creator of magic, but not as a god. Rather, they feel Malagos is simply the greatest scientific mind that has ever existed. Those dragons that know of the Titans respect them as powerful users of magic and as creators, but they consider the Titans as mentors, not divinities, to be worshipped. Likewise, the dragons respect the followers of Elune, Cenarius, and the other ancients, but they do not worship these entities themselves. The blue dragonflight is focused on the pursuit of even greater power and knowledge. This doesn't make them completely egocentric. The blue dragons do share what they learn to help others of their kind, as well as the world in general. Many blue dragons strive to impress their master, Malagos, with their knowledge of magic, or invent new spells or magical items. If a mortal shows a blue dragon a spell he has never seen, they earn that dragon's respect. If they teach the blue dragon that spell, the mortal likely gains the dragon's gratitude for a lifetime. Generally, members of the blue dragonflight consider adventurers to be of kindred spirits, but they highly favor those who are clever, inventive, and powerful. While blue dragons are slowly growing in numbers again, they lack the power to take on the children of Deathwing, such as Onyxia and Nefarian. As such, the blues entrust favored mortals and those dragonsworn with the task of fighting against these powerful black dragons, and reward their mortal allies with magical secrets and objects of power in return for risking their lives. Generally, the blue dragonflight likes the mortal races, especially those that practice arcane magic. But there are a few exceptions. Most blue dragons dislike goblins, since many goblins serve the black dragonflight, and it was a group of goblins that outfitted Deathwing with the adamantian armor attached to his scales. Likewise, blue dragons are wary of orcs, due to their role in enslaving the red dragonflight in recent years. Relations between the blue dragonflight and the other dragonflights have dramatically improved since the fall of Deathwing at Grim Batol. Many of the other dragons felt that the blues abandoned them after the construction of the World Tree, but now, red, green, bronze, and blue dragons guard Nordrasil together, once again. It should be noted, however, that several blues are somewhat bitter after the events of the Nexus War. Blue dragons are some of the foremost arcane spellcasters on Azeroth. As such, some are greatly concerned that the demon's taint may touch and corrupt the blue dragonflight. However, these concerns are unfounded. Blue dragons, blue wormkin, and the rest of the blue dragonflight are immune to arcane corruption, though no one yet really understands why. Perhaps they have mastered magic to such an extent that they surpass this danger. But if this is the case, perhaps arcanists of other races can also achieve this similar transcendence. In all honesty, the blue dragonflight is one of the most complicated and contradictive flights out of the 5. They love to learn and are always studying, becoming both very vain and boastful in their great wisdom, knowledge, and power. For their arrogance, they paid the ultimate price, and their flight was nearly destroyed altogether. This is not to say, however, that they are not powerful. Any who come across a blue will quickly learn not to underestimate them. Originally, the blues were very peaceful, but untrusting of others, exceptionally territorial, and violent when one entered into its territory. Now they seek to better understand mortals, and find ways to integrate into societies to learn about them. The blues are wise, powerful, intelligent, vain, and impatient. If anything could truly sum up the blues, it would be that in their great wisdom and knowledge, they themselves became fools. And this concludes the trivia of the Blue Dragonflight. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you want to see more episodes and comparisons, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to message me. Also, don't forget about our Facebook page that is up and running. The link to that is in the About box. Until next time, I will see you on the next episode.